when you take on this work of talking about your buttons and so forth, don't you need a partner who agrees with that? Thank you for that, because I didn't finish my thought there, and you helped me complete that thought. You need to be able to have a conversation with someone important to you, and preferably more than one person. And I have groups that I'm in where we agree to be each other's practice partners. We agree that we're going to get our buttons pushed. We're going to use this language, but we're going to use the 10 truth skills, because they keep you on your own side of the net. They keep you out of all these patterns like blaming and believing your judgments. Sure, we have judgments, but when I have a judgment, that just means one of my buttons got pushed. We get to know ourselves very well when we have a willing practice relationship like this, where we say, oh, I notice I'm judging you right now. And my judgment is you're a jerk for being so emotional. Well, all of a sudden, you shine light on the judgment. You go, oh, yeah, I got a button about that. I got a button about, I'm afraid that when you're angry at me like that, it means you don't like me. Okay, ooh, boy, that triggered something. And then I start feeling. And that's how you work in a dyad. Now, your other question was, can't you get to the point where you have such a strong self-trust or relationship with yourself that you're confident when he goes off? Certainly, yes, these buttons do get less and less. In fact, when you get to, they do get less and less powerful. And eventually, many of them will just kind of dissipate. But I don't want that to be your goal. I don't want you to think, okay, if I just do this, I'm going to get better and be free of buttons and free of pain. It will happen on its own, but when that's your goal, then you're kind of coming from a control place again. And I want you to just trust life, because life wants to heal. There is this drive to completion. That's why we're attracted to these people who push our buttons, because we have this innate drive to heal and to complete the past. And trauma recovery theory, which has been very much in our world for maybe the last 10, 15 years. And I was kind of gratified to see some of the research coming out of that world, says that if we can go back to the original trauma in homeopathic doses, just kind of touch into the pain, and then another time you touch into it again, it works to bring up that panic and that fight or flight, and you can learn to comfort yourself just by being with those sometimes extremely traumatic memories. Now, a lot of our relationship button pushing, it'll push extremely traumatic memories, or it'll push not so traumatic memories, but they're still somewhat painful. And I don't want to minimize any of them, but I don't want to make them more than they are either, because you know what? We are not little anymore. We're big now. We really have forgotten, I think, how big we are. We can contain a lot more intensity of feeling and pain than we could when we were little. Now, we have that little one inside of us that needs to be remembered and nurtured and cared for. We can't forget that little one inside of us, but we are not that being anymore. So this all leads to being able to trust yourself. And yeah, the buttons do get, the buttons get less and less and less, but the real healing is healing your fear of pain. That's the healing. So that when pain does happen, when something unexpected, when I say pain, I mean discomfort, frustration, disappointment, impatience even. Healing your need to control your environment in order to feel safe. Because as long as you're coming from that, coming from fear, and fear kind of squeezes love out of the picture, and we really want to open ourselves to being vulnerable and open to love in each moment. So we have to be able to be sensitive again. Being sensitive means feeling more pain and discomfort. Take your pick. Numbed out and not in pain, or sensitive and getting your buttons pushed once in a while, but being a vibrating in the flow type of a human being. Take your pick. This work is not for everybody. I wouldn't walk up to just anybody on Match.com and say, or you don't walk up to them and say, hey, I want to do truth and date. I want to have the truth and dating conversation. You know, because I have the book now, so I am single. I give somebody a book. Here's the truth and dating book. This is, you know, this is the curriculum for being in a relationship with Susan Campbell. What do you think? You know? But in the book, Truth in Dating, there's a couple of different examples of what I call the truth in dating conversation. And you can have this with somebody that you've been with for 30 years, because most of us need to have this conversation, which is, I value my own awakening. I value honesty and intimacy. And I know that I'm not as honest as I'd like to be. I'm not as vulnerable and expressive of my true feelings as I'd like to be. I wonder if it would interest you to take on a practice with me where we'd take some risks and say things to each other that might be uncomfortable, that might hurt each other. And learn, you know, maybe work with these tools, because I'm not going to give them a big speech about buttons, but you know, work with some of these tools so that we know how to communicate when our buttons get pushed. And like I said, you know, many couples are just learning how to push pause, say I got a button pushed, and talk about it. And the two books in the bookstore that give you most of the curriculum about how to work with buttons are the Truth in Dating book, and that really should have been titled Truth in Relating, because it's way too scary for most people who are dating. It's but if you're really committed to a partnership, or you're really committed to this path, then you'll love it. But you know, most people who pick up a book on dating, they don't want to go here. Can you imagine? So, you know, I think the book might be a little ahead of its time, but not for you guys. And then the most recent book has a whole chapter on how to communicate with another person when you get your buttons pushed. And that's the book Saying What's Real. And that is like a little primer for honest communication. It's very short, it's an easy read. I could give that to somebody on Match.com, but the other one I probably wouldn't. It's more like general public kind of book, but it's got the exercise in it that I'm going to do with you now. I want you to, this is an exercise on becoming more aware of a particular button. Think